Good morning. Welcome to our second of third scheduled budget meetings. I'm going to call our meeting to order. Ask you to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We will begin I have to get a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are operating our budget meeting with 4 of the 5 commissioners. Commissioner Kipley is absent today. Morning, Tom. I think we're starting with personnel. Is that right?
That is correct. I'll just tee up the whole presentation here. It's a shorter presentation than what you saw last time, but still a lot of ground to cover. So the agenda today will include personnel requests. So when I'm done right here, I'll turn it over to Carrie. But we'll also revisit the outside agencies. You will see the highway budget for the first time, and then follow up on vehicle requests, the budget forecast, and a discussion about opt-outs, both opt-outs levied and opt-outs in terms of a resolution. We'll conclude the meeting like we did last time with a commission discussion and any guidance you may have, but do want to remind you sort of the path that we're on right now. We are here June 30th at our second of 3 budget meetings. The next one is scheduled for the 14th, but I would encourage you just to think as we go through today's meeting, certainly at the end of it, whether there's a need to meet on the 14th. There are some alternatives. We could look at an update at the commission meeting on the 7th or the 21st, but certainly don't want to get too far ahead of myself right now. The other point that's important to note is that if you do choose to pass an opt-out resolution, that would need to be done barring a special meeting on July 7th, which is next week. That is our last scheduled meeting before the 15th of the month, which is the deadline for opt-out resolutions. And then also the next key milestone would be the filing of the provisional budget with the auditor. The target date for that is July 21st. Do remember that we canceled the July 28th meeting due to the gubernatorial runoff. So with that, I will turn it over to Carrie.
Good morning, Carrie Deaver from Human Resources. I have 3 slides for you this morning as you consider your personnel requests. The first is a recap, of course, of the positions that you're looking at. You know that you've got requests for 13 positions, 1 in the Register of Deeds office, which is basically a reinstatement of a position that was cut for 2026. And the total cost of this position would be technically less than the $77,000 because if this is approved, we would lower the part-time budget offsetting the cost, so that would have a net of $50,000. There's 2 requests from the public defender, 1 for a legal administrative specialist and 1 for an investigator. 1 request from the public advocate's office for an investigator, 2 from the state's attorney's office, an investigator and a deputy state's attorney, and then 7 from the jail, all of which are related to UC3, 6 technically on the floor, and then 1 for transport. So that's the total 13 that you're looking at. In the past, we've given you an idea of really what the growth of the department has been in the past, how many positions have been approved in the recent past. So this breaks down for you for each department that's making a personnel request, how many positions are requesting this year, of course, and then the FTE growth and the percentage growth since 2021. And the final column is which positions were approved by year. The last slide for you, a lot of times when you're looking at the legal offices, there's comparisons between them. You have to take this with a grain of salt. There are differences, of course, in how all the offices operate and what they're charged to do, but this does give you a comparison by position, by each type of the position for the offices. This year, like many of the years, most of these requests are related to public safety and justice. You've asked to have all the department heads who are making requests for positions here, and they are here to answer any questions as you may have them.
All right. Couple ways, commissioners, that we could approach this. Would you like to take each item individually, starting with the records tech, and go down the line, or do you want to discuss any particular positions within the staffing requests?
Start from the top and work down.
Okay. Want to turn your mic on?
Should I repeat myself?
So start at the top and work down?
Start at the top and work down.
I think there's not that many requests, and they bear consideration in order. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions of the Register of Deeds and the request to reestablish that position. Any questions specifically for that from the commission?
I do have one question. It's my understanding that the Register of Deeds office is down one employee from what they used to have, I believe 20 years ago. So this new position would be bringing the office to par in terms of the number of employees.
Correct. We would be back to where we were statistically for 20 years.
I know you weren't around, Alicia, when it was eliminated. Do you remember the logic or what the thought process was when we took it away? Was there something done technology-wise, or?
Yeah, I think initially they thought that when we went to DocPro, the new system, that it would create some availability for us to eliminate a position because of that new system, but unfortunately that has not been the case. And the 2 years previously, we were a little bit down on the productivity that we had for the department. I can say that last year we saw an increase, and we're already tracking at an increase from last year to this year with what we're seeing for real estate and even vital records. So the need for that position is there. And since I've started last June, I have not had 1 week where I've been full staffed.
Oh, okay. Okay. Any other questions? I personally have no opposition to filling this. I know we're going to have inside information that we'll have a new Register of Deeds in January, so I guess it'll be up to that individual to decide when they fill it or how they fill it, but this would just establish that position, so.
I would be supportive of this position. Additionally, the comment that the part-time hours will be changed, can you tell us a little bit about that?
So right now, we have trying to offset what we're seeing for demand of our department. We have enlisted the aid of a part-time individual that does come in for up to 23 hours a week to help with processing of vital records or to help with real estate. And so if we were able to get this 12th position back, then we would be able to eliminate that position because we'd have that full-time position to help us with some of those additional tasks and the demand that we're seeing.
I would just make a comment between the growth of the community every year and the fact that we're catching up with things that weren't totally accomplished. We need to have this person.
I think we're good.
All right, well, thank you guys.
Thank you. Moving on then, Public Defender is requesting a legal admin specialist. I guess what's the role of this person, and how are they going to make your office better, Tracy?
Good morning. Tracy Smith, Public Defender's Office. With the expansion into the 300 building, we have moved one of our legal office assistants over into that area. However, we do keep one area where our abuse and neglect attorneys are locked to the public because we don't have a legal office assistant over in that area in order to control the flow of traffic, keep the area locked so that nobody can go into those offices when those attorneys are over in court. We have 3 floors in the annex building, 2 legal administrative specialists on each floor to answer phones, direct clients, assist the attorneys on those floors. But with the 7 attorneys in the 300 building, we only have 1 legal administrative specialist over there. We don't have cameras, so we have to keep areas locked. When that 1 legal administrative specialist is out, we have to do some juggling. We actually have our office manager go over there, which is not a greatest use of her training and abilities. so that we can cover that area when that one legal administrative specialist is out. So we would ask so that we can have 2 over in the 300 building, just to meet the basic needs for that area, for those 7 attorneys that are over there.
Just for clarity, is a legal admin specialist the same as a legal office assistant?
It is, that's why I'm struggling with the new names and titles,
Okay,
sorry.
okay. Any questions of Tracy on this position?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. On a day-to-day basis, what does the legal admin specialist do? Are they setting appointments, giving legal advice, working closely with the attorneys? Maybe just give us a broad picture.
Sure. The position checks the fax machine, opens files. To be more efficient, we started having our legal administrative specialists help with magistrate court every day rather than having the paralegals do that. So they do go over to 130 court. Because we only have 1 over in the 300 building, that position does not go over to court because we need her over there all of the time. They answer the phones, transfer calls, schedule appointments, schedule court dates, all of that.
Okay, thank you.
How many legal admin specialists do you have per attorney?
It should be 1 to every 4 attorneys. If I did the math right now, it's with 27 attorneys, we have 6.
Okay.
So about 1 to 6,
Okay.
if I'm doing my math right.
Okay. Is that pretty standard in private practice? One for 6 or 1 for 4?
I couldn't answer that. I don't know what standard is for private practice.
Okay. Yeah, I've been on Tracy's board, Public Defenders Advisory Board, for 10 and a half years now, and when it first started, we had less administrative people and more attorneys, and the ask had always been for more attorneys, and I encouraged Tracy to look hard at the administrative side versus the attorney side. It's throwing more attorneys on make the attorney load easier, but it's an expensive fix. When it comes to putting the right people in the right positions at the right pay, this and with the expansion of the office to a different building, I hear the need and I understand the need, so I'm okay with leaving this one on the table.
I would agree.
I'm struggling a little bit, to be honest. I know we've had additional locations, but that hasn't necessarily increased the volume of work, has it?
We did make this request as part of our long-range plan, so it was included back when we did our long-range planning, even as last year. So we did account for it. It wasn't something that we didn't account for before. So we did calculate this request based on our increase in caseload as well.
Can you remind me what, excuse me, what the increase in the caseload is? I can't find that on my sheet.
I would have to look in our budget request, but I want to say 3%. I would have to look in my materials. I apologize.
Mr. Chair, could I just withhold a comment on this until we hear also from Tracy about the next position? Would it be okay to take both at the same time?
Sure. So yeah, we have a second request for an investigator from the public defender. What's our justification there, Tracy?
So the investigator position was also based on our long-range planning, based on our increase in caseload. We looked for ways to save money. Based on our caseload growth, we actually needed 39 attorneys, and we have 27. And looking for ways to be more efficient and resourceful, we started hiring an investigators. We had our first investigator in 2023, and then last year we added 2 more. Based on ABA standards, the recommendation is 1 for every 3 attorneys, and now we're at 3. Based on the number of attorneys that we have, we should actually have 9. With the increase in jail, our investigators have been able to go to the jail. They have been able to review discovery. They've been able to, once we start getting discovery, they have pulled videos, confirm whether or not we have defenses. They've been able to locate unavailable witnesses right away, resolve disputes, confirm whether or not this is a case that should go to trial, determine whether or not this is a case that should be a plea. So by resolving cases more efficiently, we've been able to save time for the attorneys, resolve cases much more efficiently, allow the attorneys to focus on the courtroom time, find witnesses that don't have addresses, whether they're at the Dudley or at the Mission. They've also helped with retrieving records, tracking down surveillance footage before it disappears, whether that's at Walmart or at a gas station. They've been able to go to the scene, investigate cases. We have had 2 cases that have gone to trial that have resulted in not guilty verdicts in the last year. We have determined that the average case age resolution has been reduced to 709 days. We understand that homicide trials require substantial investigation, require intensive investigation and litigation. Just by having those investigators for the short period of time that we have seen very good results. But we also recognize that having investigators has also helped reduce time that our clients have stayed in jail. I know that Carrie was just up here showing the personnel information for our offices, between our office, public advocate, and the state's attorney's office. We do not have victim witness assistants. We do not have folks that work in diversion. We don't have digital techs. Those are all positions that we require our investigators and paralegals and support staff to assist with. So having these positions in our office have been able to help with the workload of those particular positions, even though we don't have those exact titles. In our most recent homicide trials that we have, the state has actually started having additional staff outside their office sit on those trial cases, sit at the prosecution table. Investigators with law enforcement sit through as party representatives. They have the actual detectives with the Sioux Falls Police Department sit at tables. So those are additional staff that are included in the trial to help their prosecutorial team while the cases are taking place. By having those individuals help throughout the trial, it's a significant advantage for them. We don't have those individuals. So it is very important, if we are to continue to look for opportunities to reduce the amount of time that individuals are in custody, especially since the jail is looking to add 7 individuals to their department, that we also continue to look for opportunities to do our part in finding ways to keep these cases moving, investigate early, start working on ways to resolve cases much more efficiently. So that's another reason why we would be asking for these positions. They have been proven to be very helpful for our office. They've been proven to be able to investigate cases early and help the attorneys so that we aren't coming here asking for 39 attorneys.
So Tracy, would you say that a private investigator reduces time spent in our jail by either by a speedier trial, getting them to where they maybe should be if they're guilty, or getting them out if they're not?
Yes. By looking at our stats, before we had an investigator, in 2023, the average length of stay on a client that was a homicide case was 769. On the average length of stay, once we started having our first investigator in 2023, it was 532.
Wow. Okay.
And if I could ask Tracy, I'm sure that there's other factors that play in that too. What would those other major factors be that would impact the length of stay?
Being able to investigate early, having the ability to get out of the office, get on the street, hunt down those witnesses who are living at the Mission, who are living under the bridge, who are living out of town, doing the things that the attorneys don't have the time to do because they're in court. And they're much more cost effective. You don't want to pay an attorney to be driving around, knocking on doors, looking for a witness. These are more cost-effective positions, and they're trained. They're former police officers. They have the training to be looking for these individuals, to know what to look for in phones. I do not have the technology ability to do a digital analysis of a mobile phone. These individuals have that experience and training to talk to the state's attorney, digital texts, and explain what they need and what they're looking for.
And I guess what I'm trying to ask is what other offices impact that time period for the case outside of PDO? Because I'm sure it's not just your office.
What other individuals in the state's attorney's office?
I guess, is it state's attorney? Is it UJS? Is shortening the case processing time? I mean, I understand what you're saying about the investigator, and I think it's a great asset to your attorneys. But if the length of stay went, I think maybe you said from 769 to 709, I'm just asking.
In 2023, it was reduced down to 532, but this year, because those cases haven't fully gone, it takes a long time for a case to go to trial. In 2025, now we're at 709, but yes.
And that's a collaborative thing that multiple different offices impact that, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
But they're able to work with the City of Sioux Falls Police Department, and they're talking to other investigators, other agencies. They're going to the gas stations and grabbing that video footage before it's reused. They're knowing the right questions to ask. The other thing is, if a public defender went and talked to a witness, we can't testify to what they said in court. They have the ability to testify to what a witness said, which saves money in the long run by not having to perhaps call that witness. Now I'm getting too in the weeds, but it's more cost effective to have an investigator or somebody else testify than maybe having to withdraw from a case because you can't be a witness in your own case.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say that 2 hours ago, we had coincidentally a Public Defenders Advisory Board meeting, and two of the members of that board are judges, or former judges. And I, had the conversation with the board about the request for an investigator, and we had a pretty detailed conversation, and both judges totally saw the need, at least were advocating for an additional public defender within the office. And I hate to say this as an either or, Tracy, but we're trying to be prudent with the taxpayers' dollars, as we should be and as we are. Legal admin specialist or investigator, I don't know if we can probably justify both, but I'd be willing to consider one position or the other. Hate to ask you this, but which would you rather have?
As far as efficiency and cost effectiveness, I think an investigator at this time with reducing the number of people in jail would be the most cost efficient for the taxpayer dollar, but as far as being client-centered and wanting to ensure that somebody is there to answer the phones and greet people when they come in, and, you know, file management, I do think a legal and an administrative specialist is important as well.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to comment that I don't question that any of the positions that we are receiving requests for are not important. And if we could, I think we probably would all love to approve them all. I just remember last year hearing a legislator say that all the cuts that they look at for us for county budgeting, they would like to see us trying to cut budgets, which it is a really difficult place to be. But I agree with Commissioner Karski. I think if we have to cut one and only approve one, that is kind of what I was trying to get at. Not because we don't want to, but I guess my comment then would be, it seems like the impact of the investigator justifies that request a little more, in my mind, than the legal admin specialist. But I'm open to being persuaded otherwise, I suppose, if.
I'm in the same boat. Yep.
I'm thinking in the same direction as well, and I'm glad you asked that question, Commissioner Karski, because if you hadn't, I would have fairly soon here. And we've been looking at these positions in isolation, but taken all together, you know, sitting at $1.2 million in total between all of them. I think we've got to have a little discretion and judgment about which positions are the most absolutely necessary to cut down that cost and that request. And I have no doubt in my mind that all these requests are essential positions that are necessary for every office, but I think we've got to take a look at and make some hard choices of what we're going to consider this year, and come next year, consider the request again.
Okay. All righty. So I think we're probably on the track of an investigator over the legal admin specialist at this time, Tracy. So
Thank you.
thank you. Public advocate would also like an investigator.
Morning, Commissioners. I think that Tracy went over, I guess, the value of having an investigator. The Public Advocate's Office currently does not have one. As I think about what that would add to our office, or if you're, why we would need that at this point, I think looking at how we do things, the paralegals are tasked with also being an investigator at this point. And then everything kind of rolls from there, because then I was just talking with Vicki yesterday. She's like, I've spent my whole afternoon feeling like I've been doing paralegal work instead of actual attorney work. So this position would take that investigative piece that our paralegals are already doing, freeing them up to do more of the work that the attorneys unfortunately are doing at this point and shouldn't be spending their time on. So yeah, I'm asking for the one investigator position. We do have room for one more person in our office. When we made the move and switched offices, there is one more empty room there that can be converted into an office. So we would have room for that person as well. There wouldn't be any worries about space or anything like that.
I suppose I could have asked this to Tracy as well, but I'll ask you.
Sure.
It seems to me that with the lack or scarcity of investigators, the investigative work gets put on the shoulders of the attorneys and or the paralegals, taking them away from their other responsibilities and duties.
Correct.
Is that essentially true? Is what's going on?
Yeah, I would believe so. And just, I was thinking of an example when you were speaking with Tracy about lengthened time in jail. I had a case where my client was charged with a very, very serious crime. The only place it could have happened was in this one area during a 40-hour work week. The case was charged out without the detective reviewing all 40 hours of video footage that was available. So one of our paralegals spent an entire week going through every second of that video. And so that's just one example, and how time-consuming that is. And, an investigator obviously could shoulder that load. But that, once our paralegal did that, our client got out of jail pretty quickly. So that reduced that stay. So that's just an example of things that person could be doing.
Yeah, one additional question, I probably should have asked it earlier. Have we used private attorneys in the past?
Private investigators?
Private investigators, excuse me.
We have not. I try to keep, those costs, outside costs, low. So I do use the paralegals whenever a situation like that comes up.
I would say that Commissioner Kipley and I are on the Public Advocates Board, and we would agree that the investigator is something that needs to be added. I also think that we're looking forward to having an electronic time management system versus handwritten timesheets.
Right.
So that probably will help with the efficiency and time management, but I would support the investigator position. And I'm pretty sure Commissioner Kipley would also.
From his correspondence with me, I would agree. Yes.
Okay.
If I may comment, every time, our community's growing, Minnehaha County's growing, the city of Sioux Falls is growing, and every time somebody's arrested in the city or in the county, it's another person in jail, another state's attorney busy, another public defender busy. But as the community grows, we're adding more sheriff's deputies, we're adding more law enforcement, as we should. We want a safe community. But when we do, as we grow, just proportionately, our public safety needs grow. And this is the cost of a growing community. I wish that everybody that moved to Sioux Falls would never break a law and would, be the type of citizen that we all should be. But it doesn't happen. So we get the very tough decisions of, and do we hire attorneys? Do we hire investigators? I think the total list of attorneys for the county is probably approaching 90 right now. If I do the math correctly, it's a big number. We have one of the largest law firms in the state for employees, for attorneys. So it's a big deal. I'm supportive of the public advocate receiving an investigator.
I would agree. My primary justification is that, if I understand it correctly, your office doesn't have an investigator at this time?
It does not.
Okay.
I'm leaning in the same direction, and I would agree that we should probably approve the private investigator, given the fact that they don't presently have one. I think long-term it'll allow the staff in that office to better focus on what they were hired to do.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Moving on, the investigator train, state's attorney.
Good morning, Commissioners. Daniel Hager, Minnehaha County State's Attorney. I've certainly heard a lot of conversation about how the investigators assist in the defense offices. They do a lot of similar work in the SAO, State's Attorney's Office. What we primarily use ours for, looking for those gaps in investigations. What we've seen from jury trials is juries want to see almost everything that could be potential evidence. They want to see that as they're trying to make those decisions. We have quality Sheriff's Office, quality Sioux Falls Police Department, quality DCI in town here. But as crime rises, as our population rises, they get stretched as well. So we use our investigators to try and fill those gaps. They are very good at finding those reluctant witnesses, those missing witnesses. They investigate claims that are made by the defense. If the defense is saying, no, this is what happened, or this witness was there, we will send those investigators out to try and firm that up. They help us prep cases for trial. They also deal with the digital discovery that comes into the office. We have a duty to get that into a format that can be shared with defense. The prosecution investigators are different in that as they, very similar to what law enforcement does, as they're out collecting evidence, we have to give that to defense, right? So the work that they're doing also benefits those other offices. If a defense investigator goes out and they don't necessarily have those same burdens that a prosecution office or law enforcement has to provide that stuff. They help the county, certainly if we are finding all the evidence and giving that to the defense attorneys, they're able to work their cases more quickly. The prosecution's able to work its cases more quickly. That reduces delays. You know, you talk about some of those length of stays in custody, getting evidence, processing evidence, and that benefits. There are a lot of things that can affect that number, but certainly those are factors that come into play. They improve the ability for the fact finders, whether that's the court or the juries, to make the right decision, right? So they're not left with, well, what would that video have shown if we had that, right? If we have investigators who are getting all of that evidence, the jury is able to make that right decision, which is ultimately a public safety issue. They assist in my office with murder cases, rape cases, child sex abuse cases, those high stakes cases. That's where we're trying to utilize them. They are increasing prosecutor efficiency. When you look at numbers from last year, again, you saw a 7% increase in cases that are coming into my office. Now, a lot of those go to Tracy's office. A lot of those go to Julie's. We also have individuals who are representing themselves, individuals who are hiring private counsel. So we're working all of those cases that are coming into our criminal justice system. So that increase, juvenile crime, I mean, we've talked about this at some of these pre-budget hearings. We've seen that increase in the felony percentage, right? That's tracking what the adult crime did. We're seeing more gun crimes with those juveniles. And so this is starting to, I guess, bleed into the deputy state's attorney as well. But the need is there. Each of you have, this is, I guess from my perspective, easy for me to say, right? I've never been a county commissioner. I think this is where you have to make really hard decisions. Trying to decide, how do we spend taxpayer money? Certainly the community feels the pull of inflation just like we do. But we are reaching into their pockets and taking money and trying to make the best decisions for that. I'm very proud to say I've never gone over budget as state's attorney. That's something that matters to me. And that's something that I will always try to do. I try to be very wise with that taxpayer money. I want to maximize its use for public safety. You know, I could very easily just say, oh, we're not going to spend any money in the state's attorney's office this year, right? That would be horrible for our community. But making sure that we don't go over budget, making sure that when I'm requesting something from this commission, it has its true purpose. You know, this has been in our long-range plan. We try and take those seriously, and I know that commission asks for those for a reason. With the rise in juvenile crime, just the type of crime we're seeing, that deputy state's attorney is needed on that juvenile team. The investigator does help with efficiency. It helps get evidence and case data over to the defense attorneys. And so it's certainly, you have a hard job, but I know and I want to honor where that money is coming from. And I'm certainly appreciative even when you have reluctant payers. They want public safety, they want justice in Minnehaha County. So I'm not asking for things that I think, well, if I over ask, maybe I can get the commission to settle on what I actually need. When I look at my office, could certainly use more investigators. We have 3. We've had 3 since 2014. So it's not a division in the office that I'm trying to grow at a rapid pace. Deputy state's attorneys, we have hard-working individuals in our officers, hard-working individuals all over the county, and I'm proud of each of them. And I know that you are as well. But I don't stand here saying all I need is an investigator and a deputy state's attorney, right? If we were in a better financial position, I'd be asking for more. But I also want to recognize where we're at financially. And so I understand that hard decisions are going to be made. I respect you for it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Daniel. With the public defender, we kind of took their 2 requests together, kind of consider them, not that we're going to go the same route, but as far as final decision, but you're also looking for a new attorney in your office. You want to address that?
Yeah, touching on what we've seen, the trends in that juvenile crime, again, where it's shifting from 31% of the caseload was felonies to 60%. Felony cases, the more serious cases, just the reality is they take more time for lawyers, they take more time for support staff, they may take more time in courts. Seeing that growth with the gun crime, again, with juveniles in 2024, you had 44 firearm-related cases, 2025, 147. In 2026 so far, that again is tracking upward. So we haven't seen just a single spike back down, but it's continuing along that lines. Grand theft involving firearms with juveniles, 2024, we had 4 cases. 2025, we had 26 cases. I guess it's logical that the crime that's being committed with guns and the theft of guns with juveniles, because they can't go out and buy those firearms. So that's a natural growth. But we need attorneys to handle those cases to make sure that we're addressing those appropriately in the office and courts. And so that certainly need. The investigator need is there as well. If I had to pick between the 2, I'm going to pick the lawyer because the lawyer can do the investigative work. The investigator can't go sit and represent the state of South Dakota in court, but they're both needed.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question. Could you, if you have any idea, ballpark, could you tell me how many of your cases maybe are not defended by PDO, PAO, or county funded?
Well, I suppose, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we had 12,000 cases last year, approximately 4,000 felonies, 8,000 misdemeanors. You could add, I guess, the public defender, public advocate cases and figure that out. Now, a lot of those are co-defendant cases. So it might be one case in our office and they might each have a defendant in that same case. But I don't know what their case numbers are. So I just defer to them on that. But last year we had 12,000 adult criminal cases,
Okay.
right? So we still have juvenile cases, we still have abuse, neglect, but at least 12,000 adult criminal cases.
Thank you.
This is where we get into the weeds a little bit because, not that either one's right or wrong, but the state's attorney counts every charge as a case, and the public defender just counts if one person's charged with 3 crimes, it's just one case. So it gets kind of complex. But again, the advisory board meeting this morning, one of the judges suggested that the commission probably is missing the mark by not setting policy or standards on how many attorneys we should have and crimes and that type of thing. And I've had a few hours to digest that, and numbers change. It might be greater one year, less the next. You don't build a church for Christmas and Easter, but we got to kind of take every case, or not case, but every year and what's trend lines are looking at and kind of address the needs as it comes up.
Can I just clarify one thing? You said each charge is a case. we use like the file number in court,
Okay,
right? So if you commit, or an individual commits a simple assault and is possessing controlled substance, there would be 2 charges in that same criminal file number. So when I say 12,000 adult criminal cases, numerous charges in each of those. If I have someone who's arrested on 20 counts of possession of child pornography,
that's one.
that's one case.
But
And
if they're released and they go out and commit a different, that's,
Yep. Then it would have a different file number and a different case.
Yep.
Yeah, so that should.
you said, trying to understand the picture and how the pieces come together, and how that's counted versus this is counted is my point. I didn't mean to say that you're padding your numbers, Daniel. But yeah, I'm,
Happy to do that if you'd like. I think.
yeah, no, don't, please. So, additional questions or comments?
I just have a question, and it's more my curiosity than your budget request, but it kind of ties together. When the city increases staffing for the police department, do you see a dramatic or change in the number of arrests?
Right. As you have police department growth, when you have more officers who are out on the street, they're bringing more arrests and cases to my office.
Well, I definitely would like to see more police department officers in my neighborhood, but anyway.
Do, especially in your neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't going to bring that up, but
No, but I think Sioux Falls Police Department does a nice job as they're seeing that population growth, trying to build in and say, okay, here's what we need. And again, that they can struggle with staffing as well. But trying to make sure that they stay at a position where they're not trying to catch up, because if you fall behind in public safety, that's a hard thing to catch up on. And so they do a good job of asking for those positions. I think that the city council, the mayor are very supportive of law enforcement in Sioux Falls. And that's a good thing. So I'm always happy to see them get a larger police force. And I'll leave it to the chief to tell you whether he's where he should be or where he wants to be. But it's good to have those officers on our street. They're high quality.
thank you.
And, for anybody watching and paying attention, they're wondering why the police department's impacting the county budget. Well, the police department doesn't have a jail. They don't hire prosecutors. They don't hire defenders. Once they're arrested, they belong to us.
Could I ask another question? Could you tell me a little bit more? You mentioned in your justification for the investigator that position would turn over evidence to PDO and PAO, and I'm assuming private counsel.
Yes. So there's case law and statutes. A law enforcement entity, prosecutors, we have a duty to disclose that evidence. We have to disclose that. You hear Brady, that's the famous U.S. Supreme Court case that said, prosecutor, you have to turn all this evidence over to defense so that they can do their job properly before and in court. And so that's a duty that we have. It would violate ethical rules. It would violate the law if we did not turn that stuff over. We've talked about the challenges of digital discovery, right? Getting all the video, getting all the phone dumps, the evidence from those phones, trying to get that into a format that we can share with the defense, right? Share with that defendant. That's not something we do because it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's really tedious. It's hard to do, but we're absolutely required by the law to do that. If we fail to turn stuff over, that can lead to motions being filed in court. It can lead to cases being dismissed. It can lead to ethical complaints against myself, against my lawyers. We have that duty. We have a duty to make sure that law enforcement is complying with that. So I just can't sit back and say, well, the sheriff's office or Sioux Falls Police Department, they didn't give you that evidence, right? We have affirmative duty. So that's one that we take very seriously. We've talked in this county about providing reports. We try and provide reports as soon as we can. Some of those are provided on day one. That far exceeds what the legal requirement is for my office to turn that stuff over. But we do that because it enables the defense to make the best argument that they can at those initial appearances. That's work that my office is doing, giving them those reports on that first day before we make that bond argument. So we take that seriously. We try not to just do the bare minimum, but we are legally required to do that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. I imagine that you have an area of criminal law that you'd like the deputy state's attorney to handle, maybe an area where it's lacking, you need some additional staff. And I sort of got the sense that was juvenile cases. Was that true?
Yes, sir. Right now, the strongest need, in my opinion, and I suppose if you ask the deputy state's attorneys in my office who are working in the other areas, they might disagree with me. But based on what we're seeing in the juvenile crime world, that's where I need that deputy state's attorney. So this deputy state's attorney would work and be assigned to the juvenile criminal division.
And just to follow up, I know we approved some overhires in the past. It might have been over 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about those overhires? And I know we have a relationship with the law school.
Yes.
Are those individuals a potential hire for this position, or where does this position fit into that?
Good question. This commission did give my office, Tracy's office, the ability to overhire when we find good candidates. That's been useful. At one point at the beginning of the year, I had offered overhire positions to lawyers. We have one who's currently clerking for the Second Circuit. She's going to start in August. And then I've hired 3 other individuals who graduated law school, are taking the bar in July. So I hope they're studying. And that would have been the 4 overhires that the commission had granted to my office. Unfortunately, as we've had some of that natural attrition, we're not going to be overhired once they start. And so I do have the ability to hire some more with the overhires. But again, when I say I'm trying to stay in budget, I'm very serious about that. Confident we're going to do that again this year. But I don't anticipate that when they start, we will be overhired anymore. I haven't recruited just for an overhire position. But certainly if this is authorized, I might try and use that to see if we can find the right lawyer. It's difficult to find individuals who want to work in public service. We have, it's hard work, not always as lucrative as some of the options out in the private world are. And so you're looking for someone who has that sense of duty, that sense of service, right? We have to pair that with their legal background. And we found some really high quality lawyers and students. We've used, you talked about the partnership with the law school. We've used our practicum, we've used the alternative pathway. We've recruited 2 very good, bright young lawyers into the office from that. One of the lawyers who's going to start in after they take the bar had previously interned in our office, right? So we know that they're a known quantity. Well, another individual who we've hired into the office, they were previously a legal office assistant. Then they ended up applying, going to law school, and then applying, and they've done really well in law school. So I'm excited to have them back. And so looking for ways to recruit, looking for ways to identify who's going to be a good public servant in Minnehaha County. That's it's a fun challenge. It can be overwhelming at times when it just feels like there's no lawyers left out there. But I believe in public service. I know that there are a lot of individuals in this county who do. And we're finding some of those lawyers, so hopefully I can find another one.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. In the spirit of moving this along, I'm just going to probably tee this up a little bit. I don't know if I'm reading between the lines or actually heard you say it, but the need for the attorney is greater than the need for the investigator, and I'd be okay with approving an attorney and leaving the investigator request unfilled at this point. That's my position. I don't know if everybody else is in the same vein.
I'm thinking the same, and I'm frank a little bit torn given the fact that we just approved 2 investigators for the PDO and Public Advocate's Office, and on the defense side, that's 2 additional investigators versus 0 this budget cycle. But given the circumstances we're under, I think we need to pare it down to just 1 FTE for the State's Attorney's Office, and I think that's a good decision to get the deputy state's attorney for that, and then next year review the need for the investigator position.
Could I ask someone to move to slide 6? And then I would just like to comment that I went into this thinking along the same lines. However, I was not considering the fact that the investigator would be sharing evidence with the other offices. So that kind of tips it for me a little bit. And then also, if you would just compare those last 2 columns on the right. Thank you, Carrie. It's not apples to apples for so many reasons, but I'm very comfortable approving the attorney and on the fence about the investigator. If you compare PAO and PDO combined with the state's attorney without civil, I guess I could be persuaded. I'm somewhat leaning towards approving both, but again, it is a tough decision to make with the budget constraints that we have also. So I guess that's not very helpful to the conversation. Are we making final decisions, or is this going to?
Well, not the final, but I think to prepare the final budget, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would be willing to consider both, but if 2 of you have already weighed in and we're missing Commissioner Kipley.
I can definitely sympathize with your inner conflict on kind of torn both ways between approving just one or approving them both. I think they're necessary. I can be swayed, and maybe perhaps we can have some more conversation about it. And I'd like to hear Commissioner Kipley's point of view personally.
Commissioner Benninga.
I came in with the feeling that probably both were needed. I think there's efficiencies that we've talked about in the other legal departments that we can support. But I do believe that the growth in the community and the whole issue of trying to keep up with public safety related issues would require both positions.
All right. So, Commissioner Isey, I'm not too sure where you were on this.
Leaning towards deputy state's attorney and leaving out the investigator this year, but open to entertain the idea of hiring on both. I think with the growth in public safety needs, it looks like the office is already fairly light, given the nature of the crime and the increases over the last 5 years. I think we could consider both, but like I said, leaning towards one.
I'd suggest that we approve one for now and then take a second look at it at the next conversation.
Okay. I would agree. I'm, again, in the spirit of trying to keep budget numbers, trying to hit that sweet spot. An investigator for the state's attorney is doing, in my mind, a whole lot different job than an investigator for the public defender. I guess, I don't know if it's true or not, but if I if I'm an investigator for the state's attorney, I'm looking for evidence to prove guilt. And if I'm an investigator for the public defender, I'm looking for evidence to prove innocence. So they do share stuff, but they're also looking for different things also. So, yeah, I think the state's attorney is leaving that in the budget is the right thing to do for now. We can leave a question mark on the investigator, and when we come back to final budget numbers, hopefully when all 5 commissioners are here, we can make that final call.
Well, we have Carrie available. Could I ask if she has any information to share that, that we aren't considering?
I don't have anything to add other than what the department heads have said. I think they've done a very good job in thoroughly explaining their needs for their request.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So just to recap, tentatively approving the records tech, the investigator for public defender, the investigator for public advocate's office, the deputy state's attorney for the state's attorney's office, and then UC3 still under consideration.
Yep, UC3, I don't think there's a lot we can do there, but I'd sure love to hear from whoever from the sheriff's office would like to talk about it. I mean, if we open a new unit control, we need to staff it, and if the numbers are there, what do we do, right?
Exactly. I basically gave the majority of my pitch at the last budget meeting. I can tell you today we're sitting at 625 inmates and roughly 50 parole and DOC inmates. So that along with the higher number of Minnehaha County inmates has been the driver of needing to expand into that area. I'll also remind you that we're operating that floor currently with overtime, and the 14 positions that were previously authorized, 12 of those are 2 posts. They will be starting training here. We had a significant class of 12, which wasn't all the 12 hires, but we hired some early because we were able to find good candidates. They're in their training process. We have another class starting on July 6th. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that occupying UC3 in this minimum capacity, the way we're doing right now, requires 3 posts. I have 2 right now. So the 2027 hire is to get that 3rd post, and then the transporter for the additional movement for court and outside appointments.
Yeah, it's been years. We've been talking about delaying UC3 opening, and we're finally at the point where, yeah, we just can't delay it anymore. I think we've heard this, at least some of us have for a number of years, some of us for only a few years, but I think we get it. Thank you, Warden, unless others have questions for Warden.
I don't believe we have a choice, to be honest.
100% agree.
I would echo that, and I'd say thank you for the work that your staff does. And did I understand correctly that if this is approved, you will be running with overtime required until 2027?
Yep, until they're hired, trained, and working on their own. Obviously, depending on vacations and sick leave. There is a shift relief factor built into every post. We have to do that to maintain our minimum staffing levels when people do call in sick, and we do give people vacation. Over the last little while, we haven't had any overtime. So right now, the staff are enjoying the fact that they have overtime. They're able to fill that overtime with volunteers. We're not forcing people, generally speaking, into working the overtime, but that will continue in some limited capacity until the 2027 positions are filled.
Well, that can be a drain on morale, so I'm glad that they're excited about it right now. And thank you. Is time off approved, or do we have to decline to approve time off?
No, we haven't really had to do that
Good.
thus far.
Okay, well, thank you for how you're managing it.
Okay.
I would agree. I think our hands are tight on this one. Before I was elected, and attending commission meetings or already discussions a number of years ago about delaying this, and here we are. I think we've got to move forward with these new hires for the jail. So I would support it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on, we have a conversion staffing request.
That should be it for the new position requests, other than we are still looking for direction or confirmation, really, rather, that you're comfortable with including that 3% adjustment for elected official salaries. That's not to approve any adjustment for any particular elected official, but rather just to build it into the budget to allow you to have some flexibility in having your discussion later in the year, if you're supportive.
So you're just building the budget, but we don't make final approval till December, I think, correct?
Exactly so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Any objection to?
I'd like to make next year's salary 10% more just for me.
Just for you, yeah. That pension, right?
Yep.
All righty. Thank you,
Thank you.
Carrie.
All right, so we'll move on to outside agencies at this point. Kind of where we left off last time, the commission had expressed the desire to key in on the ambulance services, but I did just want to review some additional information on this slide to jog your memory. First off, the first three items that are listed, they're in bold. They receive domestic abuse funds. Those we are required to award not to a particular organization, but to organizations that provide domestic abuse support services. Those three do. So they currently receive and are anticipated to receive about $22,333, even in '27. Any amount above that generally comes out of the general fund, if you see that on the three lines. The other things I want to point out, there is one additional applicant this year for the ambulance services, that's MedStar. We did consider a contract earlier today at the regular commission meeting for 2026. And then the other item that is new, the other request that is new is the Borough Office of Community Services Transit. That's an organization, they have an office out of Hartford. They provide free or reduced rates transportation to low-income individuals and people with disabilities to access services throughout South Central South Dakota and Southeastern South Dakota. Again, they are a new applicant. And then the other thing I want to point out is you'll notice that agribusiness from the Chamber of Commerce has requested zero in their request, and concurrently, Forward Sioux Falls requested $5,000. Agribusiness did mention in their email to us earlier this year that they would prefer to see, if they were to get money, they would prefer to see it go to Forward Sioux Falls. So with that, I would turn it over to the commission for any guidance or discussion
Okay.
for all of these.
So approved in 2026 was 675,000 and change, and the 2027 requests get us up over $1 million. Commissioners, would we like to take them in groups or individually? That's quite a few.
I think we could take it as a whole, and if we have any questions or we want to look at anything in particular, we could look at that one item. Our last meeting, if our memory serves me correctly, we're more or less in agreement that we should keep it the same from last year, with maybe a few tweaks here and there.
I would agree with that. I think, unfortunately, they have to manage their own budgets like we have to, and we've had to prioritize what our responsibilities are, so I think we need to do that. We also, I think, and I know Tom's working on this, I think we need to come up with a formula on how we distribute funding for the ambulance services based on calls and community support, so to speak. And I know that's a long-range project more than where we're at.
And certainly, we're keeping an eye on the summer study this year to see what solutions or directions they come up with. But I just do want to remind you, for the rural ambulance services, they're requesting a $10,000, for the nonprofit rural ambulance services are requesting an increase of $10,000 from $90,000 to $100,000. And then MedStar contract was approved this morning, a subsidy contract in the amount of $45,000. So certainly your options are anything from 0 up to their requested amount. If I could just give you one, maybe food for thought in terms of the allocation, a $5,000 allocation to each of the nonprofit services would be about a 5.5% increase. I would say if you do that, I would go ahead and do likewise for MedStar. If you fund them at their requested amount at $100,000, and I do want to remind you that they have provided a demonstrated need for the specific amounts that they have asked for, all the ambulance services, then I would give a likewise amount to MedStar as well. So, perhaps from the $45,000. So if you go from $90,000 to $100,000 for the nonprofit services, I would say go from $45,000 to $50,000 for MedStar. And again, these costs are intended to cover what amounts to the lack of reimbursement that all of the ambulance services receive. And they do receive funding in varying amounts from other townships and the cities within their jurisdictions.
Tom, I'm glad you brought up MedStar, because I just wanted to clarify. Just before this, we had approved a $45,000 contract with MedStar. That's not going to be extended out to 2027.
It was for 2026, correct?
Yep. So you brought up $50,000 as a possible number to appropriate in 2027 to MedStar as a suggestion. And I'd be open to entertaining that idea, or even bringing it down to 45. I spoke a little bit arrogantly at the last budget meeting in regard to the rural ambulances, and had said I'd be open to $100,000 for each one of them, which is a $10,000 increase from the prior year. But after further thought, I'm thinking more in the vein of keeping it closer to $90,000, same as last year. But I am open to a slight increase, just throwing out a number, and it doesn't have to be this way, but 92.5, which is a $2,500 increase to the rural ambulances to recognize that 911 services aren't profitable, and they do operate at a net loss, and they provide an essential service to the community, and most of the individuals are volunteer and get paid nothing, or very relatively small amount for their essential work.
Ironically, the state legislature doesn't deem ambulances as an essential service, but yeah, I would agree that they are 100% needed, and yeah, there are so many different ways to look at how we can subsidize these ambulance services, and the nonprofit ones specifically. Some are geographic, some are call-based, and yeah, it gets totally confusing and very deep in the weeds. I'm okay with 95 for each of the ambulances and 50 at MedStar.
We can make that happen. I think it is an essential service regardless of what the people at the state think. But the whole issue of keeping them operational for now until we figure out a formula, which I know I've already talked about, I think is something we can deal with. And frankly, in a whatever the last number gets to be, $150 million budget that we're arguing and discussing, very incidental kinds of dollars. So I would agree with the 90 and the 45 each, so to speak, twice a year, and then the 50 for MedStar until we figure that out.
Just to clarify, if you're agreeing with Commissioner Karski, he had mentioned 95.
I don't ever agree with Karski. But I will this time.
I would agree also
Okay.
with the 95 and 50.
Commissioner Ising?
I would also agree, and as
Okay with
much as
that?
I would like
Okay.
to, give the other organizations an increase or match what they requested for next year, with the fact that we're already looking at a little over $1 million, maybe a little bit less on new hires, when historically we've tried to keep that number closer to $750,000 a year. I don't think we have much choice. We've got to take care of our own house first.
Okay.
All right, I will turn it over to Susan.
Did we,
Yep.
anything else on outside agencies? I think as we historically have done, and by historically, I think over 10 years, I do not remember increasing funding from any outside agencies other than the ambulances, and some other rare exceptions. One that jumps out at me is the Chamber's agribusiness. They're kind of in a, eliminated their annual, what's the word I'm looking for, their big event out at the fairgrounds and such, and they're without a director of agribusiness. But I have a feeling they're going to be coming back to the table to ask for something next year, just based on the commission or the chamber board meeting. So if we cut it, I think next year we're probably going to have to look at, agribusiness is critical to our community and our local economy. It's the number one driver, so we really, when we next year have this conversation, we got to remember that we got to support the agribusiness community through the work that the Chamber of Commerce does. So I think everything else we're good with then. Is that correct? Okay.
All right, so now I'll turn it over to Susan.
Good morning, Susan Beeman with the Auditor's Office. So we're gonna jump into the Highway Fund presentation at this time. First wanted to just walk through just a very high-level overview of the beginning cash reserve, revenue and expenses, and then where we're ending cash reserve at the end of the year. So for 2025, the ending cash reserve for Highway Fund was just under $13 million. So that's where you can see at the beginning of the year for 2026, where the cash is starting at. And then as you jump into our current budget that we're operating under now with carryover requests and such, our revenue is just over 17 million, expenses a little over 19 million, showing a decrease in revenue or in cash going to be used for 2026 budget needs. And then also, just because of accrual accounting, we've had a number of receivables booked at the end of 25. Those cash is expected to come in. So at 2026 end of year, we're projected to be around 12 million. Based upon history, we know that there's a number of expenses that are budgeted within the calendar year that will have some carryover into next year. So we do expect some of these numbers probably to move into 2027 through a carryover process, but that will be obviously identified later in the year, what those numbers will be. But that would be part of our normal process. So with our existing budget and where we're ending at the end of 26 with current budget, approved budget for 2026, we'll start the year with about 12 million in reserves. Again, 17.6 million in total revenue, and then expenses of about 18 million. A slight decrease in cash is projected for 2027, and then with the proposed Phase 2 building, we mentioned that there's some dollars in the highway fund that could be used from that approval, that transfer that was done a number of years ago that was originally approved. The dollars that came in was originally around 1.64 million, but because it's been sitting in the fund for a number of years, it's now grown over to 1.9 million. And that's why we have a $2 million transfer over to the building fund. So then that would leave our cash reserves at the end of 2027 around 9.2 million, which is still well above where the highway superintendent has indicated he wants to be. So we're definitely in a solid cash position. He is here, so if you have any specific questions on his budget, Jacob is going to be the best person to dive into those specific questions.
Are we doing the vehicle separate of the Susan, or?
Yes, the vehicles are embedded in the budget already. So if you take anything out, it will just decrease expenses, but they are going to be covered separately in detail and a little bit further down the road.
Thank you. Okay. I understand the need to have some cash, and I'm glad, but, you know, a reasonable amount, so I appreciate the highway soup looking at that and trying to keep things in line, so. Anybody have questions for
I
Jacob?
just have one comment, and I think I already know, but I want it clarified. If we do fail a Phase 2 building, we can use the $1.9 million to fund part of that, but anything above the $1.9 million has to come from the cash reserves or from fees, correct?
So the building fund, or excuse me, the Phase 2 project for Highway Shop is currently included in the building fund budget for roughly $4 million. If that project were to be approved, then we would be able to transfer that estimated right now around $2 million from the highway fund through an interfund transfer over to the building fund, and anything over and above that, so roughly $2 million would be coming out of the building fund, either restricted levy dollars or the accumulated reserves within that fund.
So, yes, I'm right.
Correct. Yes.
I just want to be right one more time.
So one thing I did not include on the means of finance from last week, but if we're comfortable with it, I did not reflect that interfund transfer on the means of finance. We did have the emergency management interfund transfer on the means of finance. If we're going to leave the $4 million building fund project in 2027, I do recommend that we put that $2 million interfund transfer. It essentially is a cash transfer. We still would have to come back to the commission to actually officially approve the interfund transfer. It just puts it in the budget that that's what we're expecting to do. Same thing with the $4 million budget for the project. It just puts the budget there. It doesn't approve the project. The actual decision to move forward with the project would have to come forward later through the official project process.
So the cash transfer can be restricted.
Correct. I mean, all we would do with the means of finance is report it there and acknowledge the fact that we have that $4 million project in the building fund, that we would intend to transfer the $2 million from the highway fund. It would just be reflected on the means of finance, but like I said, we would still have to come back with a formal action request to the commission to approve the interfund transfer at that appropriate time.
Clear? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Jacob. I always thought the cash reserves were a bit heavy, and I'm glad to see that they're being spent down a little bit here. What's the ideal percentage or figure for how much reserves should be kept with the highway department?
Historically, the thought was we want to keep enough in reserve to pay for a Big Sioux River Bridge if one of those were to collapse. We needed to pay for that immediately. That cost used to be $3 to $4 million, and now it's probably closer to $8 or $9 million, which is a lot of money to carry in the highway fund from year to year compared to the amount of money we spend on an annual basis. I would love to hear if you guys have any opinions on what a reasonable cash reserve is for the highway fund, but I think that $3 to $4 million isn't a bad idea to carry forward. There is a plan to spend down that $9 million in our 5-year construction plan. We have a 5-year plan for vehicle replacements. We have a 5-year plan for construction. And that number really takes a hit when we go and reconstruct County Highway 105 south of Garrettson. At the end of our 5-year plan, we end up right around that $3 to $4 million.
Excellent, thank you.
Any further questions on the highway fund budget, or should we move forward to vehicles? Okay. So the next section that we would like to discuss are the vehicle requests. We had only one department within the general fund requesting vehicles, and that's the sheriff's department, for 1 investigator vehicle and 6 patrol SUVs. This is their normal routine request for just their annual replacement. They decide which vehicles to replace based upon need at the time that they're doing this. We do have Captain Joe Bassman here who can speak to this in more detail. This is a normal request that you see on a reoccurring basis.
Jacob, I do have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, on vehicles.
And then this list here are the specific vehicles for the highway department, and Jacob will know way more about the vehicles than me, so I'll pass that off to him.
And that's where I'm a little confused in the specificity or whatever you say there of that request. I asked the city if they do this in their budget, but I mean, we're asking for Fords and Chevys and John Deeres. I mean, are we sold on it has to be a John Deere tractor? I mean, what if somebody else international makes a better tractor? Why are we so specific on we want a John Deere 6125M?
Yeah, so a couple different reasons. We want to bring very specific numbers into the budget process, as specific as we can. The majority of our vehicles and equipment are purchased off of like Sourcewell contracts, nationwide contracts that give government discounts, and we can purchase directly through those, or the state of South Dakota's. Generally, when we're purchasing pickup trucks, those are purchased through state of South Dakota, state of Minnesota bids. Those contracts are usually multi-year contracts, so we know what our options are out there for purchasing vehicles. And then just a track record of the types of equipment that we've used in the past. We've tried different makes and models of pickups, of loaders, of plow trucks, and I guess this is where we've settled as far as reliability. And then we have 3 mechanics out at Highway. So if we can maintain a similar fleet with similar product types, they have a better working knowledge for repair as well.
So when we bid for trucks or tractors or whatever, do we just go immediately to those other contracts, or do we do an RFP for outside organizations?
Yep, generally we do not do an RFP when we go and purchase vehicles. We look at the available purchasing cooperatives that are available to buy equipment off of, and then we can pick exactly what we want and add features onto them as well. The one exception of that would be the used vehicle that we purchased this year, which would be the bucket truck. We actually put an RFP out for that and bid it nationwide for a used bucket truck, just because that's kind of an oddity to buy something used, and came up with. We wrote the bid specs for that, so it was more or less what we wanted, but whenever we write bid specs, it's always or approve equal.
Okay. Yeah, the conversation this morning revolved around road graders or graders, and the city had a contract where they were paying $400 plus a year, or $400,000 for a grader, and they always thought that, well, we always got them from here, so we're just going to keep getting them from here. But when they opened it up, they could get them for 100,000 less per grader when they went out on a contract. So I don't know if we're just doing things because we always done them that way. And I understand consistency with parts and maintenance and being able to work on them. But at the same time, I just hope that we don't continue to do things because, well, that's the way we always did it. I'd encourage you to think outside the box a little bit with some of those things, especially on, $200,000 tractors. Is there a better way we can buy these things? So I'm not telling you you have to, but when I just read the list, I'm thinking, why are we buying just John Deere? Why aren't we opening this up for other options so that we can get more bids on these things? Because I know how a lot of these large implement dealers are. They have their pricing is the same no matter where you go. So just thinking out loud, and probably should think more than I do it out loud, but that's kind of where it's coming from right now. So, okay.
I just want to say we in large part, we kind of relying upon your expertise and what your department needs or what you think it needs. And I did want to ask, are a number of these vehicles and machines replacing used ones? Are they an additional to the fleet?
So there are two, 1.5, I'll say, new vehicles in here. So the Class 5 medium duty truck, 1.5 tons. This F550. In 2021, we gave a vehicle to the fairgrounds and we never actually replaced it. And then when we replaced another vehicle, we didn't surplus that vehicle, we kept it and are using it as a water truck, a smaller water truck which serves our roller for our paver operations. That truck is on its last legs right now, and we would like to replace that truck, but it's already technically been replaced. So that's a new request. And then the John Deere tractor. So this item is for a tractor and mowers. I want to say, are they? Oh, they're not in here. So that's for a tractor and a mower setup. What we'd like to do with that item is we would like to keep the tractor itself because we have another mower that currently isn't being utilized. We'd like to keep this tractor and use it for that mower and then buy new mowers as well. So we want to buy a new tractor and new mowers, surplus the existing mowers, keep the old tractor and use that on another mower. We would use that specifically in the fall. In the fall, we go out and do a much more detailed mowing of our ditches throughout the county where we know we have blowing snow issues in the winter to cut down on the amount of drifting and snow that we have on our roads. Everything else in here is replacing an existing piece of equipment that we have, which we feel is at the end of its useful life. We do not have any plow trucks in our request for 2027, which over the last 9 years, I think, is a new thing. Earlier today, you guys approved the purchase of a new plow truck for this year. In last year's budget, we had 2 plow trucks for 2026. We're only requesting to replace one. We feel that our fleet is in good enough shape where we can hold our position and go down the road a couple of years before we start replacing trucks again. So those plow trucks are roughly $380,000 to $400,000 a piece, all said and done. What was approved earlier today was just the chassis itself and not the actual plow equipment.
Overall, I'm not the highway liaison. I think Commissioner Benninga is.
I'm very comfortable with what Jacob is forecasting and what he's using his funding for.
Okay. I'm okay with it too.
I'm okay with it also. I just was curious, Jacob, could you maybe give us a little bit of insight? I guess I'm not sure how I want to ask this. When I started as a commissioner, it was always right or wrong, my perception that Highway managed their budget well and, it didn't impact general fund. But going forward, I think sometime in the not too distant future, we maybe will be discussing wheel tax again. Does that impact, how does that impact your budgets?
I hope that's not the case. Looking at our 5-year forecast, something we did differently this year with some help from Susan, there are several items within the highway budget which we historically underspend on. I want to say $280,000 to $380,000, somewhere in that range, is what we underspend in a couple categories, and we're able to carry that forward in our 5-year budget forecast. So that helped out significantly at the end of 5 years. I don't currently have an idea of when that request might come forward again with wheel tax, but it's not within the near future. The one thing that was added to the budget for this 5-year plan was Maple Park and our portion of building out Maple Park. If we weren't to receive a grant, that is currently shown in the highway budget's 5-year plan, and it puts us millions of dollars in the negative at the end of 5 years. Without doing construction projects for multiple years in a row, we don't have the capacity to pay for that presently. And just adding a wheel tax, it would take us 7 or 8 years of accumulating that full wheel tax and setting it aside before we could build out that road. And it probably needs to be built out before then. So we're looking at alternative funding solutions like grants for that scenario. But just as far as moving forward with the current program that we have, I don't foresee us needing a wheel tax in the next 5 years.
That's great. Thank you.
I would agree.
Okay. Thank you, Jacob.
So just to confirm, we're comfortable with the vehicle requests that are currently embedded in the budget? Okay.
Correct.
Well, as we move into budget forecast and opt-out, we just wanted to go through a couple pieces of information of where things are standing right now. You saw this slide 2 weeks ago. The only thing that has changed is this far right column. So this column right here in the middle is our budget, requested budget from 2 weeks ago, as reported. And we indicated that if you approved all the positions, that we would be at a 13.64% cash applied rate, which is roughly $10.8 million over our target of a 3%. So just to remind you that our cash applied target changed from an 8% down to 3% due to the change in legislation earlier this year that removed that 5% holdback on appropriations. So that's why we're now at a 3% target. And the reason we have a 3% target is we typically have not spent our operational expenditure budgets within the general fund by at least 3%. So if we target a 3% cash applied rate, generally that means we're not dipping into reserves. So we know that our reserves have been higher in the last couple of years than maybe where we would like them to be due to a number of factors that I won't go back and rehash. So we do want to spend down some of those reserves, but we are at higher than probably where we want to be, considering that we want to smooth and opt out over the next couple of years to balance things, because that ongoing spend down our reserves is not a feasible option in the long term. We know that we can accommodate that now in the next couple of years, but we need to plan and prepare for those reserves to be back to that level that our target level. So what we have done in this line here, or this column over here, is we've included a $3.5 million opt-out levy. So we would ask your consideration to increase property tax revenue by using existing opt-out that have been approved but not levied by $3.5 million. So that brings us down before any consideration of new positions, to roughly a 9% cash applied rate, still about 6% higher. I don't obviously have the numbers now with the changes in new personnel, but if all of the new personnel had been approved, we would be at about a $10.4 million cash applied rate. And then our target is still $3 million. So with this, we're at about a 10.21% cash applied, still about 7% higher. I'll need to go back and obviously adjust this for the two positions that were not approved, as well as the changes in outside agencies that were just discussed. Additionally, I did have one request from one department to increase their budget, and that was IT. They've gotten some new estimates for Office 365, and so they're requesting a $13,000 increase to their operational budget that's not reflected in here. So if there's support for that, I will include that in the provisional budget, along with the new positions and outside agencies that you've discussed.
Don't think the 13,000 is going to be a big impact, and I have a feeling that without it, we can hardly function properly, so we're at the mercy of Microsoft, yeah. Get outside bids on that one, right?
Yeah.
So before we I turn it over to you for conversation, I would just maybe walk through the opt-out slide here, just where we are at. The 2027 budget, I'm not going to discuss building fund because that's not where our pressure points are at this time. It's in the general fund. So as of right now, we have $20 million in approved opt-out in the building, in the general fund. If you increase the opt-out levy by the $3.5 million that I'm suggesting, that would bring us to 17.378 million opt-out levied in the general fund. So that's where you would fully now utilize the 2019 opt-out that was passed in 2019. That brings us up to fully using that. It would fully utilize the 2023 opt-out and then partially use the 2024. That would bring our opt-out capacity for future years to 2,622,000. So with that, I'll maybe just pause there for questions. I just also would remind you that part of why the $3.5 million is suggested is we had the 2006 opt-out that expired. And so that $1,625,000 dropped off of that. So that's why you see this as a zero, where last year it was $1,625,000. And just to remind you, the conversation from 2 weeks ago, with inflation, $1,625,000 is now roughly $2.7 million in cost. So I'll just pause there to see for questions or comments on if you're comfortable with a $3.5 million increase in opt-outs being levied.
We have two separate conversations going on. Levying opt-out from previous opt-outs that were approved, and then also looking at replenishing that opt-out pool that we have for an unspecified dollar amount. So right now, it's the 3.5 million that we want to talk about.
Correct. This is this $3.5 million, and this is where we would actually levy the taxes, or include in that property tax levy the $3.5 million. So again, $1,625,000 of it was there last year.
Yeah.
So the whole increase to a taxpayer is not the whole $3.5 million.
Yeah.
So just want to make sure that we're clear with that.
It is an increase, but it's not an increase of that much.
Correct. It's not a full $3.5 million increase. So right now, we're just talking about levying opt-outs that were previously passed that we currently have within our capacity. So this is the opt-out resolution for considering for future opt-outs is a separate conversation that we'll talk about next. This is just, are we comfortable including additional opt-out in the levy for 2027 budget?
Okay. Well, commissioners, conversation's ours.
And I can also go into, we have the information
Just
about the
hold that in
forecast
the
and all of
background
that,
for now.
so,
Yep, yep,
okay.
yep.
I could just mention that I understand why it's worded the way it is, but none of us are probably comfortable with a levy, but I think it's necessary. And if you look at the amount that's dropping off, like you mentioned, from that bond that's expiring or that's expired, and then you add in even just the UC3 staffing needs. I hate to say it like this, but I think it's a win that this is all we need to do to continue to manage. When you think about historically the 3% limit that legislature gives us on our growth, this is the result of a lot of good planning, primarily, I think, Susan, due to your experience and your assistance through the years. The fact that we haven't had to do this for a while, I think, is amazing at this point. So I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not comfortable with it. I wish we didn't have to do it, but I don't see any way around it. And I think the fact that it's 3.5 is a credit to all of the county departments and the budgets. And
I should maybe add one thing that I might be just important for context is a $3.5 million opt-out levy is equivalent to roughly a $38.10 increase on a $300,000 home for 2027.
But in reality, it's only 1.875 million. So
Correct, which is $20.40.
So it's a $20 property tax increase for per year for the median home in our county.
Correct. And so that's less than $2 a month is what that impact is on a $300,000 home. I just thought I would add that for context for you as you're having your conversation.
Okay.
That's a good point, because one of the news articles said it was per month when we did it the first time.
Yeah, no, it's $2 a month
Yeah.
or less than.
Well, frankly, there are no choices. You either cut your expenses or eliminate, quote, non-essential programs. And our non-essential programs are essential to the people that we're serving, like emergency services and the people that are putting all those pieces together. The other thing that, just from a historical standpoint, we were strapped for cash many years ago, and this continues to keep us afloat, so to speak, from an operational standpoint, and to not do it will create a big hassle in some point in the near future. But the other thing is the county grows and we need to replace buildings, which we've already talked about. Some of that may be needed to be used to make some acquisitions and also operate the annual budget. So I'm supportive of the projections, and frankly, as we've talked about in the past, we've opted out, but we haven't used it, which has been a good thing in some cases. So I think we're in good shape.
Well, I think the strategy that we're following is a sound one. It was really provided to us by the Financial Action Network when they came and worked twice over the last 8 years on helping the county develop a budget. And that strategy is we do have cash, but we don't want to spend it all just to go this way with the opt-outs down the road. So, I mean, we're integrating spending cash with opt-outs, and two key words when it comes to property taxes, and that's reasonable and predictable. Our role is to keep them reasonable and predictable, and I think this accomplishes that by using that strategy that you're outlining there, Susan.
Kind of on that note, Susan, could you describe the relationship between the use of opt-outs and our cash reserves, that seesaw motion, and if we take one route, how it's going to affect the other side of things over the next 5-10 years?
Absolutely, and if it's all right, I'll just move to these slides because that illustrates that. So we did see an increase in cash reserves. This blue line here is our cash reserves, and what we want to do is keep that blue line above 25% of appropriation. So that's 3 months of cash reserves. And that was a decision made by the commission a few years ago, is to keep our unassigned fund balance at 25%. Where we want to be is lower than where we are at now. And so we want to be strategic on how we spend those reserves down. If you delayed levying opt-out until absolutely necessary, what you're going to see is this line going a much steeper decline. And then in, I believe it's 29, you're going to have to levy over $8 million in opt-out a few years down the road. And what we're suggesting is levying some each year over the next few years, so you don't have a big spike in 2029. Because that would be contrary to the predictable nature of what Commissioner Karski just mentioned, where smooth opt-outs that we're layering in every year will get us to the same place, but more in a consistent and predictable manner. And so where we end up on this forecast here is by 2032, we're at a 26% cash reserve unassigned fund balance. And also with that, what we're trying to manage is not only the commission's policy of keeping that 3 month of cash, is we've also been communicated in a previous bond issue that our rating agency would see a decline in cash below 20% as potentially unfavorable to us, and that we're maybe a more risky borrower that would increase interest rates. So as we balance general fund needs at the same time of balancing reserves, knowing that we have ongoing projects down the road that are going to potentially have borrowing needed, we want to manage that all very carefully so that we don't actually increase those costs as well down the road.
It's definitely a balancing act, managing the reserves versus the use of opt-outs. Maybe you can help me making sure I'm interpreting this correctly. If we were to take that $3.5 million opt-out and levy it, how much cash reserve would we be spending down at that point?
So I'll go back to this slide here. So we would be using roughly $7.3 million in reserves. Obviously, I need to adjust for the changes from today's meeting, and I can bring that provisional budget number of use of reserves back at a subsequent meeting that would be more accurate. But we did not make significant decreases to the budget today. So I would say that'll be roughly $7.3 million.
It would be fairly marginal changes,
Yes.
which would equate to, in other words, about 10% of our cash reserve spent down.
So we know that the 10.21%, 3% of that based upon history, most likely will not be spent. Now, there could be an anomaly this year that everybody spends every dollar of their budget, and that is not, that 3% target is not correct. I've gone back 15, 20 years, and that 3% is a pretty sound number. So I feel comfortable with that as our target still. If not, it could maybe even be bumped up to 3.5% to 4%. But I think 3% is a good solid number. So we know that of the 10.4 million of cash applied here, roughly 3 million won't be spent. So roughly we're looking at, that's where the 7.3 comes into play. That's really what we would be using reserves from. Okay. And so that's why, even with a $3.5 million of opt-out included in here, why we're still projecting having to levy more opt-out in the next couple of years is because we can't long-term sustain a $7.3 million use of reserves long-term. We're fine for now. We're on that predictable spending pattern. But with future growth in the county, UC3 expansion, et cetera, we know that 7.3 is not sustainable long-term, which is why the forecast shows more opt-outs being levied in subsequent years.
Okay, thank you.
So the levy, approval of the levy to be voted on will be done on July 21st?
So what would be on July 7th would be
Or July 7th.
the next conversation, which is passing an opt-out resolution to build capacity. So
Okay.
the
So
increase.
this 3.5 would be approved at our final budget hearing in September. And on July 7th, when we talk about filling that pool of reserves, that will be the whatever dollar amount that we decide that we want to go. It has no relation to the 3.5 million that we're embedding in here, just so everybody's clear on that.
Correct. So today, for this specific conversation, what I'm looking for direction on is, are we comfortable with our recommendation of including an additional $3.5 million of property tax revenue, which would be opt-out from our current capacity in the provisional budget? Because currently what is in the budget is the 89 million number. And so what I'm looking for direction on is just confirmation to increase that by $3.5 million to the total revenue of $92.7 million.
I haven't heard any objection to building the budget around that, so I think,
Yeah, I would just comment and say I'm just as frankly uncomfortable as Commissioner Bleinberg about passing an additional opt-out. But given the constraints that we're under, the expansion of the jail for one, second, the JDC, and seeing the increase in the criminal justice costs, I'm hard-pressed to find how we could compress the budget to get around this. So for the time being, I'd be open to exploring that idea.
And as we move into subsequent years, we do have, as I indicated, more opt-out being levied in subsequent years. As we've talked 2 weeks ago, as we've talked in prior times, the forecast is a forecast. There are a lot of variables in this that very well could change. Growth, CPI are two of the factors. Also, the volume of personnel requests that would come forward in subsequent years. We do layer in 750,000 of new positions in the forecast, but obviously if that number were to be retracted down, that changes the cost needs as well. We also have full expansion of UC3 in the 5-year forecast. So again, if the jail is able to delay phase 2 and phase 3 beyond the current projections, that changes the scenarios as well. So I don't want to get too locked into the numbers of opt-outs that are in the forecast because those are going to change. But because we are now at, with levying the $3.5 million, we're at $2,622,000 in opt-out capacity. So jumping into the next conversation of an opt-out resolution, if we want to pass a new opt-out resolution that would build opt-out capacity for future years, that would need to be brought to the commission meeting on July 7th for consideration. Currently in the forecast, we have $3 million of opt-out levied in the 28 forecast. So we do not have capacity based upon this current opt-out capacity right here of $2,622,000 to meet the needs of the 28 opt-out. The direction of the fan was that we should always have enough in reserves for future needs to at least have 1 year runway is how they worded it for to be prepared for that, because obviously things are going to change. So we do ask for consideration of a new opt-out resolution to pass additional opt-out at the July 7th meeting. My suggestion would be anywhere between $2.5 to $3 million is what I would ask for consideration. And so what we would just ask for direction today is if there's support for that resolution to be brought forward on the 7th.
all right. Thoughts?
I don't think there's any debate about if we need to do it. It's just about what the dollar amount would be, to be honest. So I would be supportive of putting that together, and we can fill in the number July 7th.
I'm gonna put a number out there, you're gonna look at me like, what kind of number is that? But 5 million minus 2.62 million, what is our need in 2028? I'm trying to,
It's $3 million is what I have in the
Okay.
forecast. In the forecast, I have $3 million for 28, 29, and 2030.
so
And again, that will all be variable based upon where expenses and revenue lands. I think, I don't want to speak for the sheriff's department, but I'm thinking if you can delay phase 2 and phase 3 of UC3, you're probably good with that. And so, again, there's just a lot of variables in this that we want to prepare and know where we're headed, but we also know that things are going to change.
$2,378,000 gets us right at 5 million. Not that there's anything magic about it, but it's just a. So I think we do need to have direction or guidance for Susan to bring us an opt-out to consider at the July 7th meeting. I think we need to give her a number. I just threw one out. It's not random, there's a method to it, but if anybody else has a number that they would like to put out there.
We can use that as far as I'm concerned.
And you said, if I heard you correctly, Dean, it's 2.4 million?
$2,378,000. That'll give us $5 million in future opt-out pool available.
Susan, 3.5 was discussed earlier in the presentation. How does that number fit within this forecast here?
So the 3.5 that we discussed a few minutes ago is related to what we're levying in 2027. This is to add to our opt-out capacity, and so that would not directly or immediately impact property taxpayers. It would not have an impact to a property taxpayer until it is levied.
Right.
So what we have in our 28 forecast is 3 million being levied in 2028, but that will be obviously confirmed or adjusted as necessary in a year when we're having these conversations again.
So next week, Susan brings us an opt-out resolution that we vote on. It'll have the number of, if we want to use that number, that's fine, and we can always amend that resolution at the time of the meeting. So right now, it's just, do we want to have a resolution for Susan to bring? And is that number okay? Or if you want to use 2 million or 2.5 million or whatever number you want to use, but just to bring a resolution for final discussion next week. Correct?
I think that number would be fine to propose, and we can alter it if need be.
Okay. And then as we move on, we wanted to just end with a couple of slides of information, because this is always, what does our budget look like for a property tax owner with all of the growth in CPI, opt-outs being levied? What does that look like for an average taxpayer? So this slide does include the $3.5 million of opt-out that we just discussed that would be levied in 2027 that we would include in the provisional budget. Abstract values have increased to just over $27.4 billion. Our levy for general fund, building fund, and bond redemption, which are the three main county funds, would increase by 0.046, which is to 2.979 per 1,000. So what that looks like for a home, last year on a $300,000 home, the taxes off of the 26 levy was $879.90. Owner-occupied homes went up by 3% for a market value adjustment. So we increased it $300,000 to $309,000 to account for that market value change. So when all said and done, for a $309,000 home that received the market value increase for 2027, their taxes would go up $40.61 per year. There are certain areas of the county that would also have a library fund, rural fire based upon where they live, but all taxpayers in Minnehaha County receive these three levies for these three funds. So I just wanted to show that to you, just to have so you have an indication of all-in growth in CPI on an average home, $300,000 home that had the 3% market value, roughly a $40 increase in taxes for that home for county services. Any questions or thoughts or concerns?
I know we haven't seen anything in any kind of formal presentation for the cities or the school districts, but do you still think that's going to be somewhere around, the county's portion is going to be somewhere around 20 to 21% of the property tax values?
I don't know for sure. If you've seen stories in media in the last week, the school district, at least Sioux Falls School District, has had some publications out related to their budget and that they're anticipated to have a decrease in their levies. just to remind everyone, school funding is very different than county funding. Property taxes are really the major source of funding for us. We don't have other dollars coming in from state aid and things like that. Our revenue that we do get from other sources are usually for charges for services provided. So that rollback on the school district is not applicable to us. So I'm not sure yet, to answer your question on the school district. I would imagine that the municipal levies and the township levies would be running on a normal course unless they've had changes in their structure.
Okay.
Okay.
But
And then-
just to add to the comment that was made, I know statewide, the average is about 28% goes to the county portion of the property taxes. And however, here in Minnehaha County, I think we've averaged, and correct me if I'm wrong, between 19 and 20% of the property tax bill. So relatively lower than the statewide average.
It is, and it varies greatly based upon municipal versus township, school district by school district. I mean, it does vary, but generally, I would say we're around 20%. But again, it does vary based upon your exact location. Okay. And then lastly, just a slide showing our historical levies going back to 2022. This does include the $3.5 million opt-out that we are suggesting being levied. So you can see that overall the trend has been down. We did have a slight increase in 2024 in bond redemption. Again, that's due to the Juvenile Justice Center bond having to start being repaid for that project. Market value changes and things like that impact your levies. As market value goes up, they can drive the levies down based upon budget needs and request. So again, just a historical snapshot for you of where we've been. Okay. And then I'll turn it over to Tom to wrap things up.
All right, so just as a recap, went through personnel requests. As we understand it, Susan will include in the budget those items that were definitively shown by the commission affirmatively to include in the budget, understanding that there's probably still some discussion to be had on an investigator position in the state's attorney's office. In terms of outside agency requests, looking at a change to the rural ambulance services from 90 to 95,000 for the 3 nonprofits and from 45 to 50 for MedStar. Highway budget, no change. Vehicle request, no change. And then we just had the opt-out discussion regarding $3.5 million in terms of a levy and a draft resolution of 2.378 for next week, which leads me to next steps. So next steps, as mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, July 7th, that resolution would come before you. We do have a budget meeting carved out for July 14th, kind of given the nature of the guidance that was provided today. I guess what I would ask the chair and the rest of the commission is if you want us to come back next week with a recap and an inclusion of these budget items, and you have your discussion about that investigator position, and negate the need for a meeting on the 14th, because we'd have to come back on July 21st with the provisional budget. And the preferred approach would be to have the final provisional budget for your review on the 21st.
I'm only one vote, but I don't see a need to come back on the 14th. And, to rehash it again next week, we did leave that one item open with the investigator. I'm going to say, we publish a provisional budget, and when we do our final budget, we can make that decision. It'll increase cash applied if it does by 90,000 or whatever that number is. But at this point, I'd say you don't have to keep kicking it.
Okay.
I concur.
All right, so you'll just see Susan next week. She'll bring up the opt-out resolution.
Yep.
Then on the 21st, the provisional budget.
Commissioner Kipley will be here next week?
Yes.
All righty. Okay,
Otherwise, that's it.
sounds good. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Wait, do I have to take public input?
You should, yes, just ask for
I
it.
do, yeah, that's a dumb question. Anybody for public comment on any non-agenda item, that being the budget? All right, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.